Hello and welcome. In this video we'll be covering the second part of the North Africa campaign. We will be covering the years from 1942 to 1943. These years were particularly important because the war was finally turning in the Allies' favour. And so, by the end of this lesson you'll understand the importance of El Alamein, how the United States came to get involved in the campaign, and how the Axis forces were ultimately defeated. But before we start today's lesson, let's have a little recap from what we had learned in the first video. So by 1941, Italy wanted to expand their empire and decided to invade British-controlled Egypt. That plan did not go so well, and Britain counterattacked, pushing Italy deep into Liberia. Now, with Italy looking like they could lose the fight in North Africa, Germany decided to step in, with Adolf Hitler sending troops to North Africa to aid Italy's endeavours. And leading the German troops into Africa was no other than Erwin Rommel, one of Hitler's top generals at the time. Now, after weeks of fighting, both forces were now deadlocked in a long-standing stalemate, with neither side giving up any territories. These stalemates occurred not just because of battlefield skill, but because of the environment which they were fighting in. The desert, being an unpredictable place to fight in, usually came at the cost of damaged vehicles and damaged weapons. Therefore, both sides relied on supplies to keep them in the fight. So now let's begin with the situation in 1942. At this point, Axis forces led by Erwin Rommel had pushed British forces back deep into Egypt. British forces were in retreat and had been forced back to a defensive position at a place called El Alamein. This location was critical. El Alamein was only about 60 miles from Alexandria, and just beyond that lay the Suez Canal. If Rommel had broken through, the Axis would have taken the control of one of the most important trade routes in the world. The first major clash here was the First Battle of El Alamein in July 1942. British forces, led by Claude Auchinleck, managed to stop Rommel and his advances. It wasn't a dramatic victory, but it was incredibly important. It prevented the Axis from capturing Egypt and the Suez Canal. Soon after this, there was a major change in leadership. A new British commander came into play. His name was Bernard Montgomery. Although at this point you wouldn't think there would be any need to change leadership in the British forces, after they successfully stopped Rommel at the First Battle of El Alamein, the overall situation was still worrying. British troops had pushed back across North Africa for months, but that came at a cost, and that cost was morale. With morale being low, the British government, led by Winston Churchill, wanted a more decisive and aggressive approach. Churchill was frustrated that the army was not turning defensive success into clear victories. And as a result, in August 1942, Bernard Montgomery took command of the 8th Army. Montgomery brought a different style of leadership. Instead of rushing into battle, he focused on careful planning, building up supplies, and boosting troop morale. He made sure his army was fully prepared before launching any major attack. This change in leadership was important because it led directly to the Second Battle of El Alamein, where British forces achieved a decisive victory. So the change in command happened because Britain needed strong leadership, clear planning, and a shift from defence to victory. In October 1942, Montgomery launched the Second Battle of El Alamein. This battle is often seen as a turning point in the North Africa campaign. The Allies had several key advantages. They had more troops, more tanks, and, crucially, better supply lines. Meanwhile, the Axis forces were struggling to get fuel and equipment across the Mediterranean. After intense fighting, Rommel was forced to retreat westward. For the first time, the Axis army was no longer advancing. It was being pushed back. But the story doesn't end there. In November 1942, another major event took place, Operation Torch. This was a large-scale landing of American and British forces in Morocco and Algeria. It was the first time American ground troops had played a major role against German forces in the war. Operation Torch created a huge problem for the Axis. They were now being attacked from both directions, east and west. So by May 1943, Axis forces in North Africa were completely surrounded from the east and west. Being surrounded by both sides, the only option the Axis forces had now was to retreat northwards back through Italy. This was their only option because if they moved southwards, they would have been cut off from the rest of their forces. With Axis forces now in full retreat, not all of them managed to get back to Europe. Over 250,000 German and Italian troops surrendered, bringing the campaign to an end. So why did the Allies win? First, it came down to leadership. Montgomery's planning played a huge role. Second, supplies. The Allies had stronger supply lines at the later stages of the campaign. And thirdly, Americans' involvement. Operation Torch overwhelmed Axis forces. And with this combined, the victory secured the Mediterranean, protected the Suez Canal, and allowed the Allies to invade Italy later in 1943. Now, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it. And if you've missed part 1, don't forget to check that out because we discuss why the battle in North Africa started in the first place.